Well, we're in Psalm 56, so let's read the first few verses. Be merciful unto me, O God, for man would swallow me up. He, fighting daily, oppresseth me. Mine enemies would daily swallow me up, for they be many that fight against me, O thou most high. What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. In God I will praise his word. In God I have put my trust. I will not fear what flesh can do unto me. So we'll pause there. We talked through verse 1 yesterday about the mercy of God and the freedom, the liberty we have to access that mercy when we feel that we'll be swallowed up. I want to press a little further into verse 2 now, where David already said that men are daily oppressing him. And the idea is like when you twist to wring something out, or when you bind ropes together, just the pressure, it's the real wrenching of life. And David says, mine enemies would daily swallow me up. Every day, David is waking up knowing that there's a price on his head and that he's literally hunted prey. So every day, the pressure and the feeling, the sense that he could be swallowed up today. For there be many that fight against me. And whether physically or spiritually, that same thing could be said of you and me. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. There is a spiritual war raging against you and your faith and your growth and your family every day. And so it is imperative to us that we understand. Now, I don't like to give the devil any more credit than he deserves. There's a fight, but he's a wimp. He is a deceiver. He's a liar. His main weapon is lies and deception. And so the only real power we can give him is if we believe his lies. And perhaps that's why the counter of Jesus saying, when the Son of Man comes, will there be faith on earth? Will there be belief? Will there be true trust in God? We're so prone to believe the lies of our own imagination, of our own society and world. So there is a daily sense of being swallowed up in deception and in imaginations. For there be many that fight against me, O thou most high. So every day it's a battle. Every day it's a living out in mercy or a living out in fear. And that's what I want you to see in verse 3. What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. Now, I want to break this down for a minute. First of all, David's admitting that there are times, legitimately, as a follower of God, that he was afraid, okay? And I want to say that there's essentially three kinds of fear, okay? There's a physical, instinctive fear that's triggered anytime that there's a sense of danger. And that's really a gift. I read many years ago, a friend of mine was a partner in a personal security firm led by a man named Gavin DeBecker. Gavin is very well known around the world in terms of threat management. And he wrote a really good book. It's not a Christian book. It's I don't know that Gavin's a Christian, although that I know my friend witnessed to him. But he wrote a book called The Gift of Fear. And he was just simply talking about the number of crimes that happen where people denied their instinctive internal warning mechanisms. He talked about fear sometimes being that unexplainable, inexplicable vibe that you get when maybe you're around someone or you see someone or you see a situation and you're just. He talked about a woman who had been overcome by a predator and an attacker who simply stepped into a situation and offered to help her carry her groceries from her car to her door. And how that in her mind, she was uncomfortable with that, but she reasoned away that fear, that warning mechanism, and that led to the opportunity for her to be vulnerable is the essence. And so there's a good kind of instinctive, physiological, sensory kind of fear that warns us when we're perhaps in danger, and it's telling us to take action, to be wary, to be careful. And whether you call that fear or just an instinctive warning system, it is a gift. So we're going to set that aside because I don't really think that's what David is referring to. Then there's two kinds of fear. The next kind of fear is a spiritual alarm or terror, fright. Okay, and that's really what David's referring to. In fact, the root word of this is to be frightened, in a sense of dread, terrified, intimidated, and so that's more of a psychological experience. And here's the thing about fear: God has not given us a spirit of fear. This is why I say it's a spiritual, psychological, emotional experience. Our imaginations can create this, and perhaps this is why one of the things Gavin talks about in the book is that we're the only creatures that have the capacity, the self-awareness, to be able to reason ourselves away from our natural warning instincts. So animals don't do that. You know, they listen, they have that instinctive warning, and they flee, okay? When I was away, I was telling the church family this past week about being on a paddleboard in some shallow waters where there were sharks and stingrays and sea turtles, and I would try to get close to those sea turtles. You could see their heads pop up every now and then. They were feeding, and you could see them under the water. But as soon as the paddleboard got close enough where they could sense my shadow, boom, they would just dart. And it was amazing to watch. But their instinctive response was to protect themselves. So DeBecker was talking about how we can reason ourselves out of that instinctive response. All right, why do we have the ability to reason ourselves out of that? Because the second kind of fear is psychological, emotional, spiritual, and it needs to be reckoned with. It needs to be reasoned with. So instinctive warnings, we need to take heed, okay? When you're in a situation or a crowd or where you have a mechanism that's telling you, don't trust that person, don't go there, get out of this space quickly, that's because you're perceiving something that your conscious mind can't really identify what it is, but your internal warning mechanism perceives that your subconscious is saying, remove yourself. You should listen to that, okay? But what we're talking about here is imaginations or literal things that would induce terror against the protective presence, guiding direction, and calming presence of the Spirit of God, okay? Living with a spirit of fear, and then letting those imaginations and that terror rise up and enlarge in your own heart, and keep you from following God, okay? It's being afraid of the will of God. It's being afraid to do the right thing. It's being afraid to lead out in courage in critical ways in your life, or it's the paralysis of disengagement because I'm afraid and not really trusting God to care for me as I obey Him. All right, we could go on. The point is, David says, what time I'm afraid, that kind of fear, I will trust in thee. There's an irrational, unspiritual, disobedient kind of fear that is stirred up by imaginations, that will paralyze me and keep me from obeying. And living in that is not an option. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and of power and of a sound mind. Fear is an imagined, undesirable future, okay? And God says, I haven't given you that. Whenever you feel that, whenever you sense that or experience that kind of psychological and emotional place, that is not from God. And that's the time you reckon and you say, I'm going to set this kind of fear, this terror aside. I'm not going to live in this or let it drive my decisions or my behavior. I am going to choose to trust in thee. A friend of mine who's gone through some very deep waters the last 5 years said to me yesterday, Pastor, whenever I don't know what to do, I wait. I don't do anything, and I listen to God, and I trust in Him. And soon enough, He tells me what to do. I love that mechanism. I love that way of thinking. Hey, happy Friday. Join us on Sunday, and I'll see you Monday.